It was my experience growing up that I didn't get to go to national parks. We didn't get to do these like long summer road trips.
We should be working so that all people, all communities have access to our public lands.
Our public lands are our backyards. We use them for recreation, we use them to find solace and peace.
The benefits of that are clean air, clean water, more habitat for threatened species.
Protecting these places, we're ensuring that people in urban areas have access to these places.
I believe that access to nature is a civil right. It's also a human right.
Everyone is benefited when there's good policy that protects our public open spaces.
It took 6 years, but I think it really stands apart from other public lands bills by virtue of the way we tried to look at all these different needs and stitch them together.
It's an opportunity for us to think about our future right now.
Be patient with the technical aspect of it. Go with the flow, get engaged, maybe learn a thing or two.
Hi, hey Mark. My name is Advocacy. Hey, I like your setup.
Thank you.
So we're live. We're just letting Azeneth join on. And Christian. Hi, Christian with Latino Outdoors. Let's see if we can move this camera a little bit better.
We could maybe move ourselves a little bit back.
Move this. Oh yeah, there we go. There we go. And there we are. So we're streaming live. We're at the Audubon Center today. We have our guests. Let me just show everyone that we're not lying here. And here is the audience tonight. So awesome. So I'm gonna let our moderator take it away.
All right. Thank you and welcome everyone, both whoever is joining in from our house or workplace, car, park, wherever you are. I know the pandemic has taught everyone to be way more flexible, way more resourceful, and kind of adapting. So in the spirit of that, definitely have a little bit of patience as we try to use some grace as we navigate through our issues. But first of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Laura Navar, and I work for the National Parks Conservation Association, NPCA for short. And I'm very excited to be here today to have this intimate conversation about public lands, advocacy, and of course, Latino Conservation Week. And we are here at the Audubon Center at Debs Park. If you're in the LA area, I highly recommend coming to visit this place for birding, for more programming. Once we get up to speed on that, I know that this is a little bit of a soft opening for the center. And before I go on, I do want to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral home of the Tongva, and the rest of you are at home joining us from wherever that is, and we're happy to share this experience. So once again, this conversation is about the Public Lands Act and how you can help. Go to the Instagrams, follow on social media. There's a couple of actions there. But today we really wanted to hear from some of the experts in this field and their experience. We have a couple of panelists on the screen. You will see Hamar Lim with Audubon, California, whose favorite park is Sheldon Olita Park in Sun Valley. And they can share more, but a little bit that they shared before is how they are bringing kindness and compassion to communities that have been disproportionately impacted by environmental injustices. And I think this is something that unfortunately can resonate with many communities across the country, and really looking at tools for mentorship, so that our communities are not only surviving, but really thriving. Next, I'm going to introduce Christian Lamont, who is currently in the role of communications and storytelling programs managers for Latino Outdoors at the national level. Prior to that, he was a volunteer here based out of Los Angeles as well. And I was really lucky to get to meet him through that. If you're in the LA area, reach out to him. If you're not in the LA area, due to his national position, also reach out to him. And our very special guest, Belinda Faustino, right here, definitely deserves an applause for her many, many years of experience, but not just her experience that we could talk about her resume, such as being appointed by Secretary of Interior Ken Salazar to be on the National Park Service Advisory Council Board in 2010, and then again reappointed in 2014 by then Secretary Sally Jewell, and also being a co-chair of the American Latino Heritage Experts Panel and the Urban Committee. But more than that, I think just her role in encouraging younger Latinas, younger Latinos to not only step into this career, but to grow. I know personally, it was great to have her give me a welcome into this space. And even now, even though she's sort of retired, because she continues to do this work, knowing that I can always count on her is a really great, it's a really great blessing to have. So thank you for joining us. One second. I think we are in the portion of the program where we are playing some videos.
Hi, I'm Senator Alex Padilla, and I have the honor of representing California in the United States Senate, and I'm proud to be the first Latino to do so. California's public lands and natural spaces are some of our greatest national treasures, from the Mojave Desert to the Carrizo Plain to the Northern California redwoods. And California's public lands are exactly that. They belong to the public. But too many children, especially in communities of color, grow up without access to outdoor spaces. Nationwide, nearly 3/4 of people of color live in nature-deprived communities. Los Angeles is one of the most densely populated regions of the country, but it has one of the lowest rates of park access. With just 3.3 acres of park space per 1,000 residents, Los Angeles has just half the rate of park access as other high-density cities. It's critical that we promote equity at the same time as we protect the environment, so that all Californians can enjoy the beauty of our state. I'm thankful for the partnership of so many community organizations that are helping to bring equity to the outdoors. I want to thank Latino Outdoors, Nature for All, and so many others for your advocacy and your leadership. As we celebrate the 8th annual Latino Conservation Week, today is dedicated to Advocacy Afuera. I want to thank all the members of the community who are joining us, because advocacy starts with you. With the support of the conservation community, I'm proud to be leading 2 bills in the Senate to protect California's environment and promote equitable access to the outdoors. One of the first bills I introduced in the Senate is the Public Lands Act, which will expand protections for over 1 million acres of California's public lands. With new wilderness designations, we will restore important wildlife habitats, protect biodiversity, and provide more communities with access to the outdoors. This will also help us meet the existential threat of the climate crisis. The science is clear. Protected lands are our best natural weapon for capturing carbon, reducing our emissions, and ensuring clean air for all. The Public Lands Act will help California and the nation meet the critical benchmark of conserving 30% of our lands and waters by 2030. As we protect our state's natural treasures, we need to make sure that all families can enjoy them. That's why I'll soon be introducing a second bill, the Outdoors for All Act. This bill aims to close the nature gap in cities and towns where public parks are all too rare. More than 80% of the United States population live in cities, but city residents don't have equitable access to outdoor recreation, as we know all too well in Los Angeles. On average, parks that serve communities of color are half the size of parks that serve white communities, and they're 5 times more crowded. The Outdoors for All Act would begin to fix that injustice by prioritizing park projects in underserved communities. This bill will ensure that as our cities grow, outdoor spaces grow with them, including trees, green spaces, urban trails, and preserved natural habitats. I look forward to continuing the fight with all of you to move these bills through the United States Congress. These proposals were built from the ground up, informed by hundreds of local advocates, business leaders, and community groups, and we need your support to help make them a reality. With Democratic majorities in Congress and the leadership of the Biden-Harris administration, we have an opportunity to protect public lands and create local parks for everyone to enjoy. Latinos have always been integral to the conservation movement, and I thank you for continuing that proud tradition.
Thank you. One of the benefits of having a hybrid event is that not only do we get an audience that goes beyond what we could physically have here, but we can also have guests join us through video. So it's a little bit of an attempt to find the best of both in-person events and also some of the benefits we've seen over this time with a virtual event. So as a brief recap, the public lands, let me make sure I'm saying this right. The full name is the Protecting Unique and Beautiful Landscapes by Investing in California. This is really important because California has been a leader when it comes to conservation. We want to remain a leader when it comes to conservation. And there are plenty of resources, so you can go and look at this bill in more depth. But just as a very brief summary, it's a legislative package that includes 3 bills. One that's more specific to Northern California wilderness, another one that's more specific to the Central Coast Heritage Protection Act, and the last one that's right here in our backyard, the San Gabriel Mountains Foothills and Rivers Protection Act. And if you are connected to the environmental movement in Los Angeles, I'm sure you have heard of the San Gabriels. That's where a majority of Angelinos, visitors, go and recreate. It's definitely one of my favorite places and an introduction to wilderness for myself. So as we move into more of the panel discussion, and we want to definitely thank Senator Alex Padilla for sharing a couple of words with us during this special time of Latino Conservation Week. We're going to start off with a round panel discussion with one question for about 15 minutes, more or less, and then we'll move on to the next portion. So for the first question, I'm going to start with Belinda, since she's right here to my left, and then we will move on to our other guest. Everyone needs to get involved in advocating for public lands. And as we consider that we need the voice of everyone, I wanted to hear a little bit more about your personal connection to public lands, and if there was a moment or an experience where the light bulb or like that connection really kind of changed your perspective and your commitment to protecting these places? So starting with you, Belinda.
Sure. Thank you, Laura, and thank you everybody who's online and here. I appreciate it. So I think that, for me, it was really kind of from the get-go. My parents were very much into nature. My mom came from Mazatlan, so she loved the beach, she loved the outdoors. That was kind of her thing. And, there were 6 kids. So we spent a lot of time in the outdoors because we had a tiny little house. And, going to the park on Sunday was like an absolute must. And that kind of spurred my interest in the environment and the outdoors. And I was, again, fortunate that we were able to do camping trips and all. But I think the real turning point for me was when I started my career. I graduated from college and, ended up working in a couple of different government jobs, and then found out about an opening with the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. And I thought, well, wow, how cool could that be to go work for, a conservancy that is all about, protecting nature and the Santa Monica Mountains. I'd grown up in LA. I knew that I had heard of the Santa Monica Mountains, but I had never been there. So I thought, what the hell, I can do this work. Let me apply. And, at that time, this was, in the late 70s, early 80s, there weren't a whole lot of Latinos in any kind of environmental organization at all. I was the only one. In Santa Monica was a very small organization, but we were fortunate that our executive director actually grew up in Monterey Park and grew up, in a Latino community. And his, perspective on public lands was just so spot on. And there are clearly some challenges to, access issues to the Santa Monicas and to the beach. But he was of the mind of, these public lands, when we spend public money on buying the land for protection, it needs to be available for everybody. And one of the big challenges that was constantly being faced in the Santa Monicas was NIMBYism. People didn't, they wanted the land protected, but they didn't necessarily want the public to come in. And that was huge. I really admire the fact that he was, I really consider him my top mentor in my career, that it was, no, if we're going to do this, we're going to make sure that there's public access. We're going to make sure that we invest in communities so that they can visit these places as well. So to me, that was like the big aha moment and turning point where I was like, okay, I was living in, the San Gabriel Valley, commuting to Malibu for 10 years. And it was like my worlds were like 2 separate worlds. It was the world over here that I was working on the environment, and then my world at home. And then when I started seeing, hey, there's real opportunity here for myself to be able to make a difference. And frankly, right now, I'm looking out at here in the audience and on the screen. I mean, we are so blessed that things have changed. I tell you, it's just night and day of, my colleagues are all people of color. We're making a difference. We have, for the first time, a state parks director who's a Latino. We have LA County Parks and Rec department that is led by a Latina. So things are changing, and I think that it's something that gives me just the greatest joy to know that I had even a small part of that. So that's my little quick story.
Thank you, Belinda. Thank you. And it's always so important to remind ourselves of, yes, there's still a lot of work to be done, but it is such a different feeling and experience to know that the number of supporters and the number of people who are going to help us in that process is growing. But next, I will go on to Haymar so they can tell us a little bit about their own aha moment in terms of going from connecting to really enjoying to really understanding why it's so important to be an advocate for these places.
Hey, that's a tough fact to follow, but I'll try. I kind of grew up without a ton of access to things like national parks, like what was being said in the video. And my mom, who's from Michoacan, really enjoyed bringing us outdoors, so we would spend a lot of time in public parks that were nearby. But I actually learned this relatively recently. I grew up in Baldwin Park, and I didn't know how close we were to the Angeles National Forest until after I had moved away from LA. when, well, I moved away from LA when I was still in elementary school, but relatively recently I learned, oh my gosh, we had this great wilderness area right there, and we didn't have that much access to it. But um, for the most part, I started out just going to parks and stuff, and thinking about the outdoors as this way that I could sort of disconnect from all of the kind of strife of everyday life with school and things like that, that it was my place to kind of unplug. And I really didn't start to make these connections about the outdoors being connected to my life until after I went to college, and I studied biology. And a lot of the people studying biology there were doing work about climate change. They were doing all sorts of different studies about how climate change affects this or that, and we all know that it affects so many things in so many different ways. Um, but it was kind of something that for me was rather disheartening, and it gave me a lot of sort of climate anxiety because it was just like such an overwhelming problem, and it seemed like everything everyone was studying just, it was like, oh my gosh, everything is bad. There's nothing I can do to stop this giant thing as an individual. And then I kind of reconnected with a group that took me out and did recreational rowing out on the Hudson River in New York Harbor, um, after college. And I started working with that nonprofit group on a volunteer basis. And I really started plugging into that community and realizing how the connection that people make with sort of nature access groups and nonprofits and people that are working as outdoor educators start to build those seeds to make you think about nature as something that's beyond, something that's outside and something that you can just use to disconnect, and something that is at home and really connected. And that was the aha moment, because I thought, oh my goodness, this is how I can make a contribution as an individual when I might not be able to go and stop climate change by myself, but I can work together with other people to increase access to nature to people at my local community level, and we can affect things like um, local biodiversity and access to nature, and changing people's attitudes towards nature. And that is the kind of movement that needs to build at a sort of grassroots level, to affect the change at a larger level. So it was really that kind of community engagement with groups that made me think, whoa, I'm part of something that needs me in it, and I need to answer the call and get other people on board.
Not sure you can hear the claps for you, but there was some clapping going on. Definitely. Thank you so much. I wish we had so much more time for each speaker, but I was really resonating with that feeling of navigating the multiple feelings of being overwhelmed, of maybe having a little bit of a feeling of like, why did it happen until I was in college or until this experience? But the other side of that is that it's never too late to get involved. And, everyone's timing is going to work out for them for their own journey, whether it's the advocacy journey or the connecting journey. So I really appreciate, Hamar, how you talked about your very personal aha moment and making a connection to this movement and with others. So the reason why we're kind of covering the same question with all our panelists is to also emphasize that there isn't a wrong or right way to come into this work, to come into this community. And, it's important that we all share our stories, because I know there are moments where we can feel like oh, my story isn't that special, or I haven't done X, Y, and Z. But the reality is we need everyone's voices. So we're also giving and honoring that space for every panelist to share their own aha moment, because the same thing won't resonate with everyone. And like it was already stated, we cannot overemphasize that we need everyone to participate in this movement. So moving on to Azaneh.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited. And yeah, just like everybody else, my connection to nature, it was almost like a luxury growing up. I'm from Torreon, Coahuila, and it's a very polluted city in Mexico. I don't think I lived near a park, not even 10 miles near me, but I have factories all over me. And one of my most precious memories from my childhood is my dad used to collect, not collect, but he used to sell metals, like recyclable metals. And I used to go sell them with him. But in order to get to the place, we had to go to this park. So every time that I would go with him, he would later take me to the park. And I would look for all the medals. And my mom would be like, why are you so excited to get medals, right? But it was because I wanted to go to that park. It was, they used to call it the forest, but it wasn't really a forest. It's just like the closest we had to a forest in Torreon. And coming over here, I'm raised in Pocoima, and it's a very park community as well, just like Torreon was. And to me, it's always been very impactful how even immigrating, right, like to a different country, the certain things still follow you, like pollution and still living in a poor park community, how those things could relate. And I didn't have a connection to nature as well till I got to college. I started camping. I camped for the first time when I was 19. It was a whole group in my school. They used to call outdoor adventures, and we had to pay. So I saved money for my birthday. That was my gift, and it was the first time I went to Joshua Tree. And I came back home and I told my whole family, oh no, we have to go camping. I know how to camp. Like I know how to wash the dishes outside, and we could cook and everything. So it was a whole different experience. And since then, I started getting more involved with that group, and it was also a privilege because not every student had the money to be able to pay for those programs or just being outdoors. And my last year in college, I really got into EJ. I was doing a lot of work around environmental justice, and I was very blessed to take a life-changing trip to Mono Lake. And it was my first time in Yosemite, and we were over there for a week. And I remember we did a night walk I think in the forest or by a river. And it was the first time I heard like the river without no like city noise or nothing. And I just couldn't help but cry. I was going through a lot during that stage of my life. And I felt like if it wasn't for that trip, nature was very healing for me in many ways. And I was able to, I would always think of that trip. I still do. And I'm like, whoa, like what nature did to me during that trip was completely changed my life. I used to think of nature as like going to the nursery. I never saw like the mountains or a river or anything else as like accessible to me, or even something that I could take care of, right? I always thought it's way too big for me to do anything about it. It's like I was so disconnected from it. And that trip really, really changed my life. And I started enjoying and taking care of nature in a different way. And yeah, since then I've been able to camp out, and I started working with Nature for All about half a year ago. And it's crazy because if it wasn't for them, they took me to my first Angeles camping trip. And it's like, well, I've been living in LA for so long, and I was never able to go. And there's still so much that we have to do, right? I'm a transit rider, and I still don't know how to drive. So there's so many things that are still not accessible for us. But I'm just really excited every time I get to visit a new place. And I always think of my family, and when I'm out there, I'm like, okay, like, because I'm here, they're going to be able to come here. And I try to remember all the routes and all the trips and just any tips that I could remember. I'm like, okay, when I bring my family, we're going to be good. Like, I'm going to be the expert for them. Yeah. So that's been my connection to nature. Thank you.
Thank you. And my apologies. We have to be nimble. We had a different guest speaker lined up due to health reasons. Very last minute, as Annette agreed to jump on and be a part of this program. And I just caught that I did not introduce who she was at the beginning of the program. She is the coordinator for Nature for All for the organization and the coalition. Newer staff to this space, but as you can tell, not new to this topic, not new to this subject. And I really enjoyed how she connected the idea of being open to challenging ideas we had previously, being open to the healing benefits of nature, being open to think about how our past colors, how we connect to things, and also the very, very important issue of connecting to the environmental justice movement. So definitely thank you for that. And last but not least, we will be moving on to Christian.
Of course, I'm on mute after a year of this. So thank you, Laura. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your stories. I'll keep mine super quick. I was born in Mexico DF, and huge metropolis, pollution as far as the eye can see, but there's also all these hidden gems. El Parque Chapultepec, everywhere is some place you can play soccer, whether it's on the street or in a parking lot or on the side of a park. And then I grew up in Colorado, and my experience in Colorado was the outdoors was closer. You know, the typical idea of the outdoors, these mountains, these streams, this clean air, but it felt very exclusive. You know, if you couldn't afford it, if you didn't look or dress a certain way, you were really kind of left on your own. You were left behind. And then I got to Los Angeles, and I was exploring all these places, encountering barriers on my own. And it was actually my first ever group hike with Latino Outdoors. And it was with the founder, Jose Gonzalez. And we went up to the Baldwin Hills Scenic Overlook. And it's a lot of stairs. I'm like, I don't know about this. I don't know about going on a hike with a group. I don't know anybody. And then we just started falling in and out of Spanish. People started looking like, what is this? What are all these Latinos and this language and this unabashed pride going up this incline? And then we got to the top, and it's this beautiful overlook, the scenic overlook. It was right after a big rain. You know, like LA had seen like 3 weeks of rain. It was the first time everybody could go out. And you know, LA is so beautiful when the rain stops. And Jose like pointed out, and he just kind of said, what do you see here? And everybody was like, traffic, concrete, you know, barriers, buses, cars. And then he said, as I like to call it, like a Rafiki moment from The Lion King. He says, look harder. And we did look harder. He said, that right there, that's a city park. That right there, that's a county park. That over there is a national forest. That over there is the Santa Monica National Recreation Area. That over there is a marine sanctuary. That over there, and literally we did a 360-degree view of Los Angeles. And that, like, though I had enjoyed the outdoors, though I had participated in the outdoors, though I had faced the hurdles that accessing the outdoors can bring, that was my aha moment, that these things weren't just coincidental. It wasn't just that park and that park. It was this great group, what I thought of it as was opportunity. How do we break barriers down? How do we smash gates? How do we like rattle cages and raise our voices and unite and be together so that we can get more people to enjoy the outdoors, so that we can get more people to these trails so that they feel safe, they feel welcome, they feel like it's for them as much as anybody else. They feel like it comes with respect. And so that was really my aha moment, though I've enjoyed the outdoors a lot, most of my life. It really was with my hike, a group hike with Latino Outdoors, that I was able to say, like, okay, I'm home. There are like-minded individuals and organizations and people who have devoted either their lives or months of their lives into making sure that these open spaces and green spaces are protected, or that we will create more open spaces where there are the opportunities. So that's my aha moment.
Thank you, Christian. I definitely felt like a lot of warm and fuzzies for Latino Outdoors, as I was also a volunteer for Latino Outdoors before I worked for the National Parks Conservation Association. And I just really like how you highlighted the themes of being in unity with community, about being unashamed of who we are, unashamed of our culture, of what we're wearing, of what we're not doing correctly. And most importantly, really the idea and the sense that together we are unstoppable. And that immediately made me think of this phrase in Spanish that's un pueblo unido jamás será vencido, which roughly translates to like a united people cannot be vanquished. Maybe the second part's wrong, but you know, the first part's the important part about how it's so important. And I think that is something that I see over and over is like the sense of community. So thank you to all our panelists for briefly, of course, we could spend way more time asking about their personal connections and their experience, because that's just like not even scratching the surface of what all these great people have done so far. But we do have to keep the program going. So with that, we will be moving on to a short video by Congresswoman Judy Chu. And we are really honored to have her ongoing support. Definitely not someone who's new to being a park champion, not someone who's new to supporting equitable access to the outdoors, but someone who has been in this position of really highlighting the need of equitable access to the outdoors for everyone for years, and someone that we know is very passionate about this topic. So we are transitioning to that video.
Hello, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu, and I'm so thrilled to be here today for this important panel during Latino Conservation Week. After years of advocacy and hard work, our legislation to further protect and connect the San Gabriels is closer than ever to becoming a reality. And I can't imagine getting to this point without the hard work of the organizations and activists here today. Despite being blessed with so many amazing natural places, the Los Angeles area is amongst the most park-poor regions in the country. In fact, LA County has just 3.3 acres of park space per 1,000 people, which is less than half the median green space in other dense cities. And after the year of quarantine we just had, the need for outdoor spaces is more important than ever. That's because access to parks and public space isn't just about getting out of the house. It has real, tangible benefits for public health and well-being in our communities. Studies show that having access to parks leads to an increase in physical activity of almost 50%. Yet too many neighborhoods lack access to these green spaces where they can exercise, socialize, recreate, and reap the mental and physical health benefits of spending time in nature. But we can change that. The San Gabriel Mountains represent 70% of LA County's open space and are within a 90-minute drive of 15 million people. Protecting, preserving, and connecting the mountains will mean more park space for Angelenos and will make such a difference to so many people, bringing lasting benefits for generations to come. That's the motivation behind the years of tireless advocacy and organizing that you've led in our communities. In 2014, President Obama recognized those efforts when he granted my request to designate the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument, immediately bringing new federal funding and resources to the mountains. This designation resulted in the hiring of more staff, extensive cleanups, and graffiti removal, and leveraged millions of dollars in private philanthropy. Since the designation of the National Monument, we've seen our rivers cleaned up, our picnic areas cleared of trash, increased access to trails that are safer and better marked, more rangers interacting with visitors, and most importantly, our entire community at the table developing the management plan for our San Gabriel Mountains. But this was just a first step, and there is more to be done. That is why we need the San Gabriel Mountains and Foothills and Rivers Protection Act. That would complete our vision of mountains and rivers seamlessly connected to the urban communities below. My legislation would expand the National Monument to include the Western Angeles National Forest, designate 30,000 acres of new and expanded wilderness, protect over 45 miles of wild and scenic rivers, and create a new national recreation area in the foothill communities and along the river corridor. I'm pleased to say that this bill has passed the House of Representatives as part of H.R. 803, the Protecting America's Wilderness and Public Lands Act, and with the incredible leadership of Senator Alex Padilla and the support of President Biden and Vice President Harris, we are closer than ever to making this vision a reality. But even as we work towards this goal, we are finding new ways to improve access to the mountains. And in addition to advancing bills like the San Gabriel Mountains, Foothills, and Rivers Protection Act, I'm especially so proud that I was able to secure over $1.1 million in funding by inserting it in the House Appropriations Bill specifically for the San Gabriels. This funding will be spent on two incredible projects that will bring more Angelenos into the mountains and improve their experience once they get there. That includes Nature for All's LA San Gabriel Mountains Urban's shuttle system, which will connect the LA Metro GO line to 5 public shuttle stops at key locations in the mountains all the way to Mount Wilson. This represents the next step toward establishing a robust transit to trails network in our region and will ensure that anyone who takes public transit will have a connection to the mountains. And I'm also proud to have secured funding for Amigos de los Rios to improve multicultural visitor reception, trail safety, wayfinding, and interpretive signage for key locations within the Angeles National Forest. Our communities are diverse, and it's important that everyone feels safe and confident in the mountains and has the same opportunity to learn about what makes them so special. So thank you again for holding this important event and making Latino Recreation Week such an important event.
So we are definitely grateful and thankful we have great champions, but those champions definitely depend on our voices and just the everyday person, the community, to speak up for these issues, because without our voices, it's harder for them to move these policies forward. And we know that self-representation is important. We know that advocacy is important, but that really starts with connecting people. And I know that there is a lot of expertise in policy, and there's also a growing number of people who are doing the outreach and the engagement and the programming, because sometimes the heavy policy is not the way to get a new person to engage and to commit in the long term. When we were hearing about those personal connections to nature from our panelists, they were very much an individual experience. None of them went too heavy into policy, but rather those other elements that are very important. So as we think about connecting people for the sake of advocacy, self-representation, and also protecting our public spaces, it really starts with access to nature. And having that in mind, this is an open question, so any of the panelists, feel free to share your thoughts, to talk about what accessibility, and more importantly, what does equitable access mean to you in this space?
Maybe I'll just jump in here real quick. It really, to me, has kind of honed in recently with the pandemic that I think the divide between who has access to the mountains and who doesn't has gotten, frankly, a little worse because, those of us that have access to vehicles, that can get to the mountains, can go out, do hikes, have those experiences, are pretty privileged, and the people that I worry about are the ones that don't have reliable cars. I mean, you've got to assume that, we all want to, I think, have that access to nature. We all love that natural beauty. But if you can't experience it on a regular basis, that's a real downer, and has led to, I think, a lot of our, mental health problems and such. So I really think that it's critically important that we figure out, and I'm so glad that Congresswoman Chu has attempted to get the funding for creating the public transit access, at least into the St. Gabriel's, and hopefully we can expand on that with other programs to be able to develop transit access to local parks as well. But that's just so critically important that we have to provide that way that people can experience nature. And if they can't get to the mountains, that they can at least get to their local park so that they could have some experience with recreational access, because it's just so critical. I mean, our kids right now are just suffering from, having to be on Zoom for classes, and it's just something that we, I think, need to really invest in. I'll leave it there.
Any other panelists have something to add?
I would say the same thing. Just feeling that you could get to nature, especially it's like 90 minutes away from us, and it seems almost impossible to get there. I don't know. I love going to the beach, and I take the bus to the beach. I would love to take the bus to the mountains. So I'm really excited for all the upcoming transit programs that we're going to have.
Do you have, Christian?
I was just going to say something that I refer to a lot is it's the hike to get to the hike, which is all the barriers you access just to get to the trail. I'm also a transit rider, and you have to go on this epic day-long journey to get to a trail, and then you realize it's not, for example, if we've got family or friends or ourselves are in wheelchairs or mobility aids, you do all of that to get there, and there's not even the information that you get. So the accessibility, the barriers to accessibility are information, transportation, mobility, accessibility. So it's definitely an uphill battle, but I'm so inspired, honestly, every day by all the people who are working day and night to address these barriers and to make the outdoors more accessible for all. And so, yeah.
I would quickly chime in that, in addition to what everybody said about the lack of access having all of these detrimental health effects, the other big thing that, we kind of all touched upon with our stories at the beginning was not having access to those aha moments, right? Too many people, because the access is so poor, don't get those moments. And then that almost fundamentally limits the imagination in a way where it's like people who don't have the access are the ones who need it the most, but they don't know that they need it the most because they don't know that they need it. And, there are so many ways in which this plays out, like a very common one is if you don't have a lot of green space in an area and you have more sort of asphalt and concrete, as climate change makes temperatures warmer, having less trees around even makes the area that you're staying in hotter. And people just don't know that because they're not, if you grow up without trees all over you, why are you going to advocate for more trees, right? It's something that having that access to nature is something that we basically need to bridge that gap. Otherwise, you have this negative feedback loop where, well, people don't know that they need the access to nature, and then the access to nature gets worse because of that, because there is no advocacy asking for it.
Thank you, everyone. And I think, Hamar, your comments were a perfect segue into really starting to think about advocacy. And just a very quick pitch for a partner organization, since some other staff is in the audience. I was kind of like, oh, I wish we could have a microphone and go into the audience, because I know there's a lot of knowledge in our audience too, which is Community Nature Connection. So definitely check out their website. I know they have run pilot programs to really reduce the transportation barrier, but it's, it's like a tiny drop of water in this big bucket we need to fill to increase access. But going back to the point of advocacy, I know at times working on park issues for me personally has been interesting in that I go into communities and sometimes that doesn't seem like the top of the list concern, especially when we're working with communities who have housing insecurity, job instability, a lot of issues that we're not going to get into today. But the reality is that advocating for public lands, for nature, for environmental justice does affect us on a day-to-day basis. And more importantly, I think why we're so proactive about sharing stories, getting voices, is because we know that the skills of advocacy are transferable. Just because you become a park advocate doesn't mean that's going to be the only thing you advocate. In fact, the more perspectives we get, the better understanding we will get about how park issues connect to these other things and why it's important for people to gain that confidence. And I think for me, in addition to protecting parks and designations and expanding things, which I'm all for because I'm a park nerd and that's just kind of who I am, it's also building the confidence so that we understand that we can advocate for ourselves, for our communities, on park issues, and so much more. So with that sentiment of connecting park advocacy to advocacy in general and the multiple benefits it could have for our communities, we will move on to a third clip to really look at the importance of advocacy.
So advocacy is basically using your voice around a issue that you feel very passionate about. It's looking at the community and looking at ways in which to make the community better. We don't want to drown out anyone's voices, and we also don't want to take up space when they are the ones that can be speaking up and advocating. And so to me, it reminds me of something I heard from Kelly Caballero, a Tongva singer-songwriter here in LA, who said, I don't want you to stand in front of me, I want you to stand beside me regarding these issues. And so I think to that often when I think of issues that affect communities, I want to make space for these communities at the table. I don't want to take up space.
You can get your community involved by telling everybody, making some noise about what you're excited about, making it personal, telling stories about why this is important to you, and really just finding ways to get people involved. Start with groups, form groups of groups, and that's an easier way to get more people on board, to get your message across faster, to get it distributed to more people. If you work collaboratively with other organizations, ensuring that the work is mutually beneficial to both groups. So if you can find, like youth groups to get involved, if you can find parent organizations, hiking groups, all of those things, to really build a larger movement, I think that is a really much more effective strategy than trying to go out on your own and like get people to, sign on one by one.
And I thank you to Christian for pulling that footage together. He probably won't let you know, but I'll let you know. He's the person behind a lot of that work. And for our last question, to be respectful of time, we might go a few minutes over to not rush it so much, but we are being conscious of the time commitment we had asked of people, is to go back and to connect to a lot of policy change, a lot of protecting public lands, but really beyond that, a lot of important matters when it comes to improving the conditions in our community happen because of advocacy. And like Graciela mentioned in the video, getting together with other people, forming more groups, knowing that you're not doing this alone. So from the panelists, if we could hear from you, what your experience has been with advocacy and why it's so important. If there was anything like a tip or some insight or a lesson learned that you would have for someone who's just starting out in terms of advocating for public lands. And I will be leaving this open to whoever is ready to start the conversation.
I think I just had my moment right now in this panel. Right now, Laura, when you were mentioning how, I think it was Laura, how like advocacy is transferable, like in any issue that we're fighting for. It was very difficult for me, especially starting a job during the pandemic, and I was like, whoa, like there's so many other issues, and why am I like so why is my job I'm starting to concentrate so much in public lands, right? But it was also my disconnect to nature and not understanding that was essential to me, and that it is important for my community to have access to that. It was really tough because there's so many other issues that I felt like they're more important, but they're not. They're all at the same level, and if we don't have access to that, then like health concerns and like mental health concerns and so many other things come with that. But I think I just had my moment in this panel. Like, I think it just made sense to me that I was like, whoa, it's true. It's because I never had the connection to nature, that I never placed it at such higher value, just like the other concerns that my community is facing, from pollution to housing to anything else that we face. And I think for somebody that's starting to advocate, not just in public lands, I think I've been advocating all my life from other issues, but I would say I think it starts after your connection to nature, after that first moment that you have. So one thing that I wouldn't know how to tell somebody how to do it, but one thing that I will have to do on my own is make sure to at least get like 10 people or like a small group of people to have that moment that I had, those opportunities that I had. And even if it's my little brother or like my little sister or my little neighbors or anybody, even just take them to the park, and so they don't realize so late or at a later age like I did, that yes, fighting for the public lands or parks or just anything related to nature is as important as housing, as pollution, as anything else that I see as important. But I literally just happened right now in this panel to me. I was like, I've been having that conversation with myself. I'm like, okay, like, why am I having a hard time? And I'm like, whoa, it just happened right now. So I'm very thankful for this space.
Who wants to go next?
I can go. That resonated so much with me, and I've had similar conversations with a lot of my Latinx coworkers at Audubon, because some of them are like, yo, there's so many important issues going on. Why am I spending all my time fighting for birds, right? And not that they don't like birds, but it just feels like, whoa, there's such a disconnect between the conservation movement and movements that include people of identities that haven't traditionally been included in that movement, right? And it's not a big secret that a lot of the past in the conservation movement has been very exclusionary. It's done things like kick indigenous people out of national parks and, all sorts of things. And it's been worse for it. Like, one of the huge problems that we're facing in California right now is wildfire that are kind of out of control because we use different fire management practices than what was being practiced by the indigenous people for thousands and thousands of years. And the work of advocating for our communities, which are really connected to this land in ways that the conservation movement, or at least the sort of like John Muir style American conservation movement have been, set. It you need those perspectives. Otherwise, you're going to keep running into issues where you find that the conservation movement is somehow contrary to movements for equitable housing and things like that. So the advocacy work is, there's advocacy work in writing bills and not writing bills, advocating for bills and calling your representatives. And all of these things are very important in sort of making people listen and respond to the needs of the community. But on the other side of the coin, there's advocacy in being somewhere, in occupying space outdoors. It is a radical thing for people of our community to be seen in the outdoors. And the more we show up and the more we go and make these spaces our own, the more we make them equitable and serve all of us. And it's going to be for the better of everyone,
Thank you. And we are in an outdoor setting, so I don't think everybody caught the wildlife, but we've had some chirping and some other wildlife tuning in to like second those sentiments. But I did see Christian's hand go up, so I'm going to pass the mic over to him.
I will go real quickly so that Belinda has the last word. But especially during Latino Conservation Week, if you want to know how can I help advocate for these lands, we talk about the accidental environmentalist, the person who's like, I'm a little embarrassed to ask, to be curious. This week is full of opportunities. Like, look up the hashtag Latino Conservation Week, shameless plug, but check it out and you will see workshops, you will see panels, you will see Zoom links. Things that maybe before the pandemic, we didn't always have the access to this kind of information. We weren't always invited to these kinds of tables, to these kinds of conversations. And sometimes we are weirdly lucky that it takes a click of a link to learn and to be enthusiastic and to be in the midst of these giants and these thought leaders. And so if you're creative, go get on TikTok, express your creativity. You love this park, show people. If you want to take the next step, well, then sign up for that webinar. If you want to take the next step after that, download that toolkit. If you want to take the next step after that, volunteer for an organization. If there's somebody that's an advocate for the outdoors that you like on, let's say, Instagram, follow them, then follow who they follow, then follow who they follow and they follow. And suddenly you will realize that there's this whole powerful world of communication and storytelling and passion. And you can be entry level or you can be experienced, beyond your years. But there is there's an opportunity for all of us to learn and to advocate for the things we care about. And so passion, creativity, and a little bit of social media goes a really long way. So I encourage everybody, like, get out there, explore.
Well, Christian, you said it so brilliantly. I don't know that there's any more that I can add. That, you know, I think here we have a great audience of people both online and here at Deb's that, you know, have, I think, really got the advocacy bug and, you know, understand what that means and how critical it is. Because, I mean, we would not be here today celebrating, you know, where we're at with Senator Padilla and Congresswoman Chu if it were not for advocates. And I want to give a big shout out to, you know, the idea of leveraging organizations that maybe are not the traditional advocacy groups to just make them aware of these opportunities. I think one of our biggest success stories, and we have a representative here from COFEM, is the work that Nature for All did, you know, going back 10 years to bring in a group that was, you know, an immigrants' rights group, you know, and say, hey, you know, this is important to all populations. And yes, you know, critical that we get immigration rights addressed, that we get health issues addressed, education, et cetera. But, you know, central to all of that is how we feel our, you know, compassion with nature. So I think that that's, you know, part of what we all have to continue to strive for, that there are populations that maybe are not the traditional environmentalists that we want to bring into this, and how do we get them to advocate for this as well? Because that's what is the secret sauce here, is that, you know, it's really got to be those different groups that really support this and advocate for it. So thank you all. I really appreciate the time. And Laura, you did an amazing job emceeing, so thank you.
Well, it's easy to MC when we have great guests, great energy out here in this beautiful space. Just kind of a very quick recap. Definitely, I agree with the ideas of showing up, taking space, being radical. And I think it's definitely in the line of radical self-love. And for those who like books and will always ask for book recommendations, read Adrienne Marie Brown's Emergent Strategy. I highly recommend that book. Ongoing reflection, you know, just because we've been in there for a couple of years doesn't mean we don't have more to learn. Definitely sharing. And I think what we're doing here today, we're listening to each other. We're giving each other space to be seen, to be heard. When we're approaching new communities, different communities, a potential partner, you know, yes, we might have some of the know-how on the policy and how to maneuver that complicated system, which I won't even go into my frustrations on why it's so complicated when things are should be so simple. But I think a big lesson that I have learned myself in my years of doing this is, like, while I might think I know what the benefits are and why this is good, I really need to start by listening to my partner, to my community member, in terms of understanding how they're going to relate to it. What am I missing? You know, even with my years of experience, what am I not seeing? What am I still not bringing to the table that they can bring? And instead of saying, like, hey, you know, I'm now going to incorporate this, really, like, stepping aside and giving people a chance to speak for themselves. So we try to model that a little bit here with this panel, listening to each other. I definitely advocate to continue to listen to each other, to different perspectives, to grow our movement. And with that, sort of almost ending on time, a very, very big thank you to Belinda, to Aseneth for jumping on last minute and still bringing a lot of passion, to Haymar for bringing a lot of experience, and also hopefully we get to meet in person one day, and to Christian for definitely still keeping LA, you know, a great place and part of the best coast. Kidding, not kidding. But without further ado, good night, everyone. And thank you for this great audience. It's been great to share this space.